you have stories from your family members that you want to get into your memoir? Maybe your Aunt Elsa escaped the Nazis and you want to tell her story. Or maybe your Uncle Sal used to hang out with Al Capone. Or maybe your grandfather is credited with inventing s'mores. Easy, right? Just tell their stories. Not so fast, grasshopper. Including your family member stories in your memoir might sound easy, but this is actually rife with peril if you don't know what you're doing. Rife. What does that even mean? Today, I'm going to give you the same advice that I've given to hundreds of clients in my 17 years as a memoir writing coach. I also dealt with this very issue when writing my own memoir, which was published by Three Rivers, part of Penguin Random House. In this video, I'm going to talk about why readers hate reading family stories. I'm also going to talk about 4 ways to get around this problem.
You will enjoy this memoir.
And I'm going to give you examples from published memoirs to help you understand the right way to do this. First of all, let's talk about why it's a problem to include other people's stories in your memoir. Well, the main problem is that good writing is subjective writing. What is subjective writing, you might be asking yourself? Well, basically subjective writing is anything that a video camera would not pick up. So when writing a memoir, yes, you want to tell us what a person did or what a person saw. That is your objective writing. But you also want to tell us what a person thought and felt when they were doing and seeing these things. What makes the writing so great in a memoir is actually the subjective writing. It's what gives us the narrator's unique point of view. It feels like we're inside the narrator's head. It's how you give the reader the sensation that they actually know you. And it's also what makes writing interesting. So the same is also true of fiction. Literary fiction is full of examples of subjective writing. Here I've highlighted the first page of Barbara Kingsolver's The Bean Trees. I've highlighted the subjective writing. Here is the first page of Crime and Punishment. Again, I've highlighted the subjective writing. So if you want to read these carefully, you can click on the link in the description and I'll give you access to these highlighted excerpts. At the end of this video, I'll also link to another video that talks about subjective writing in depth. What I want you to understand for now is that all good books put us inside the head of the narrator or of the characters, or both. That is what makes for emotionally affecting literature. In fact, it's what creates an emotional experience for the reader. So this is easy for novelists to do because they can be inside of the heads of all of their characters. They can have this omniscient third-person narrator if they want. They can be God. So as a novelist, it's easy to give us different points of view. It would be easy to write about your family member stories if you were writing fiction. As a memoirist, we have this expectation that we will be inside your head, that you will be our guide, that we are getting your point of view. And that's what makes us care about the book. It's the fact that we're rooting for you. But this means also that we don't really care about your grandmother. We don't really care what your grandfather was doing during Prohibition. So how do you get away with putting their stories in your book? Let me give you an example of how Tara Westover does this, and then I will talk about what it is exactly she's doing. I don't know when the man in that photograph became the man I know as my father. Perhaps there was no single moment. Dad married when he was 21, had his first son, my brother Tony, at 22. When he was 24, Dad asked Mother if they could hire an herbalist to midwife my brother Sean. She agreed. Was that the first hint, or was it just Gene being Gene, eccentric and unconventional, trying to shock his disapproving in-laws? After all, when Tyler was born 20 months later, the birth took place in a hospital. When Dad was 27, Luke was born, at home, delivered by a midwife. Dad decided not to file for a birth certificate, a decision he repeated with Audrey, Richard, and me. A few years later, around the time he turned 30, Dad pulled my brothers out of school. I don't remember it because it was before I was born, but I wonder if perhaps that was a turning point. In the 4 years that followed, Dad got rid of the telephone and chose not to renew his license to drive. He stopped registering and insuring the family car. Then he began to hoard food. The last part sounds like my father, but it is not the father my older brothers remember. Dad had just turned 40 when the feds laid siege to the Weavers, an event that confirmed his worst fears. After that, he was at war, even if the war was only in his head. Perhaps it is why Tony looks at that photo and sees his father, and I see a stranger. So in this short excerpt, we get lots of information about Tara Westover's father, but this is still told from her point of view. This is still Tara Westover's story. Okay, so what are the actual facts that we get? Dad married when he was 21, had his first son, my brother Tony, at 22. When he was 24, Dad asked Mother if they would hire an herbalist to midwife my brother Sean, right? These are facts. This is the objective writing, the writing that a video camera would pick up. When Dad was 27, Luke was born at home, delivered by a midwife. Dad decided not to file for a birth certificate, a decision he repeated with Audrey, Richard, and me. Actually, that's kind of borderline. Do you have how do you show someone not filing for a birth certificate? But we're not going to worry about the gray area. A few years later, around the time he turned 30, Dad pulled my brothers out of school. So more objective writing there. So we're getting a lot of information about the author's father. But in the end, what I want you to notice is that this is still about the author. This is still about the narrator. Basically, we are still inside of Tara Westover's head. This is still from the narrator's point of view, not her father's. Take a look at this excerpt and see how many times she uses the word I in describing her dad. I count 6 times in just 3 paragraphs. So, what is your first option for telling another person's story in your book? Well, it's to put us inside your head even when telling another person's story. So let me give you another example, another technique for how to do this. This is from The Liars Club by Mary Karr. Paolo finally got up enough courage or desperation to appear there for a final showdown. For some reason, I picture Daddy stretched out on a narrow bed in a string t-shirt and boxer shorts, his eyes narrowing like a snake's when Paolo, whom I imagine in the seersucker suit he wore for his wedding snapshot, ducked into the room with slanty ceilings. Mother was there to watch all this. At some point, the talk got heated, and Paolo called Mother a strumpet, for which Daddy was said to have stomped a serious mud hole in Paolo's ass. It was the first time Mother saw Daddy fight. After that, I picture Paolo more or less crawling down the stairs. He shipped out to Saudi Arabia, never to be seen again, until his picture cropped up in a box some decades later, and I asked Mom who the hell that was. So, another way to tell us someone else's story is to picture that you were there. So we're still inside the narrator's head. We're inside Tara Westover's head, but she's putting us there in the scene using words like, I imagine, a picture. So in this case, we are still actually getting the narrator's point of view. It's just done in a slightly different way. The narrator is imagining she had been there at the time. In just a minute, I'm going to get into the next way of telling other people's stories in your memoir. Before I do, be sure to check the link in the description to get your free 7-part class on how to structure your memoir. Also, check out my new book, The Memoir Engineering System. Okay, so this next technique is a little bit harder to pull off. You need to be an experienced writer to try this one. So let's look at how Martha Weinman Lear does this in her memoir, Heart Sounds, when writing about her husband. He awoke at 7 a.m. with pain in his chest, the sort of pain that might cause panic if one were not a doctor, as he was, and did not know, as he knew, that it was heartburn. He went into the kitchen to get some Coke, whose secret syrups often relieve heartburn. The refrigerator door seemed heavy, and he noted that he was having trouble unscrewing the bottle cap. Finally, he wrenched it off, cursing the defective cap. He poured some liquid, took a sip. The pain did not go away. Another sip. Still no relief. Now he grew more attentive. He stood motionless, observing symptoms. His breath was coming hard. He felt faint. He was sweating, though the August morning was still cool. He put fingers to his pulse. It was rapid and weak. A powerful burning sensation was beginning to spread through his chest, radiating upward into his throat. Into his arm? No, but the pain was growing worse. Now it was crushing. Crushing, just as it is always described. And worse, even than the pain, was the sensation of losing all power, a terrifying seepage of strength. He could feel the entire degenerative process accelerating. He was growing fainter, faster. The pulse was growing weaker, faster. He was sweating much more profusely now, a heavy, clammy sweat. He felt the life juices were draining from his body. He felt that he was about to die. Okay, so what is the author doing here? Well, she's using this omniscient writer technique, usually reserved for fiction writers. So let me show you where this is happening, where we are getting subjective writing from her husband's point of view. The sort of pain that might cause panic if he were not a doctor as he was and did not know as he knew that it was heartburn. Okay, so that is very much his point of view. You have to be inside his body, inside his head, to have those kinds of thoughts. The refrigerator door seemed heavy, right? Again, we're inside her husband's body. The pain did not go away. Still, no relief. Now he grew more attentive. A powerful burning sensation was beginning to spread through his chest, radiating upward into his throat. Again, you have to be inside his body to have those kinds of sensations. You wouldn't write about another person that way. So that is how the author is giving us the illusion that she is inside her husband's body, inside her husband's brain. So this kind of writing is usually reserved for fiction writers, where you have this omniscient narrator who knows what other people are thinking. In real life, we're just not capable of that unless you're clairvoyant. But here it works. Now, why it works is because we're dealing with a really experienced writer. What I've seen a lot of my clients do is imitate this, and it comes across as insincere. So you can absolutely do this in your memoir, but proceed with caution, because it's really easy for this to look amateurish. You really have to know what you're doing and be a really confident prose writer to make your reader really believe that you are inside someone else's head. So even if you're not going to try this technique, what I want you to take away from this example is that it's the subjective writing that makes this piece work, that gives it its emotional resonance. So let me take the subjective writing out of this excerpt, and I want you to see what's left over. I also want you to see if it makes you feel anything. He awoke at 7 a.m. He went into the kitchen to get some Coke. He was having trouble unscrewing the bottle cap. Finally, he wrenched it off, cursing the defective cap. He poured some liquid, took a sip, another sip. He stood motionless. His breath was coming hard. He was sweating. He put fingers to his pulse. He was sweating much more profusely now. So most of the original excerpt is actually subjective writing. If you want to take a shot at this, go for it. Just proceed with caution. This leads us to the fourth technique for how to tell another person's story in your book. So let's go to the memoir Hungry Heart by Jennifer Weiner. They settled in Detroit and eventually had two daughters. My Aunt Marlene, born 1941, and my mother Frances, who arrived 2 years later. Marlene was the good girl, blonde, feminine, an academic stand-up who skipped a grade and finished college at 19. Oh yes, she was a handful, says Nana, her voice clear and vibrant on the phone. Nana celebrated her 100th birthday 6 months ago. Her mind is still sharp, and her memories of her younger daughter still make her sound both rueful and amused. She was the exact opposite of Marlene. She was fun, but hard to handle. She wanted her way, and that was it. Fran's lackey and worshipful sycophant was her cousin Sharon, Nana's brother's daughter. Freddie had come home from the war with a Purple Heart and courted and married Ruth, a war widow with a young daughter. He'd adopted Sharon, who was a year younger than my mother, and who, according to Nana, would have done anything for Fran's approval. Your mother would tell Sharon, "We're going fishing, but you have to get up early to get the fish." So Sharon would get up at 4 in the morning, and we'd hear her in the kitchen making Frances her cheese sandwiches. And then your mother would make her go outside and dig the worms. So what is the author doing in this example? Well, she's interviewing her Nana to get the story about other family members. And where is a subjective writing? Well, we're actually inside the narrator's head as she talks to Nana and gets the story. Okay, so let me just give you one quick warning about this technique. If you want to use this in your book, make sure that the interview you conduct is not outside of the main timeline driving your story. So let's say you're writing a childhood memoir, and we're at the part of the story where you are 8 years old and you are moving forward in time, discussing your childhood. Don't all of a sudden take us out of that timeline to an interview you had with your grandmother when you were an adult, right? What the solution would be to have a conversation that you actually had about your family members when you were 8 years old. So, want to learn more about subjective writing? If you do, and you want to learn how it works to transport your reader, watch this video next. Your goal is to give your reader an emotional experience, not a visual experience. The way to do this is through subjective writing.